quite unstable. I hope this holds. I am right now in Iloilo City, my city, and I am on quarantine. So I'm not at home. That's why I'm just in a pension house and hoping that this connection will hold. So good morning, everyone. Um, Let me share my screen. um, in case, just a quick one, in case my internet gets disconnected, Mirek Pieszka will take over, and then I will try as much as possible to be back. Yes. So yeah, we start off by remembering what we did yesterday, that we said that ministry governance is a very important act of stewardship, and we want at the end of our terms or even the end of our lives to hear the words of the Lord, well done, good and faithful servant. So let us just look at a picture of IFES for now, or our national movements. There are many ways of describing the ministry of IFES. Our core mission, of course, is to advance the kingdom of God by investing in a very strategic segment, which are the students. However, internally, IFES and each of the national movements has a number of ways in which they interact with each other. And in reality, IFES is in fact three things in one. At first, I was speaking to you in Tagalog. First, it is a movement. Secondly, it is a fellowship. And thirdly, it is an organization. So each of these three realities needs to be acknowledged, addressed, and held in tension with one another. Sometimes when we say IFES or our national movement, it's all like conglomerated and we don't know what we are meaning. So this picture actually for us helps to know which area of IFES or our national movement we are referring to. So each of these three realities needs to be acknowledged, addressed, and as I said, held in tension with one another. And it is especially helpful when we are having discussions about who we are, what we do and why we do it, to recognize which of these three areas we are primarily referring to. So as a movement, we are driven by student initiative. As an organization or as a fellowship, we are driven by relationships. Here in the Philippines, we say that if you're a member of IVCF Philippines, you have dugong IV. That means you have the blood of IVCF. And that is like a description of how close or the type of relationships that InterVarsity alumni have with one another. And as an organization, we are driven by good governance in the board level and effective structures in the management level. So these 3 points, we need to understand them when we are talking about our national movement. So we need to keep these in mind when considering how to address issues that we are facing, both the positive and the negative. So what we will be doing today is to look at the 10 top tips for good governance or for having good boards. And I'm not sure because I was cut off. I will be dealing with the first 4 tips, and Mirek will take over for the 5th to the 10th tip. And I have timed myself so I don't go over. Okay, first, before that, How do we understand governance? We have many illustrations actually in the governance development team when we give our trainings. And one of the good illustrations that we can really describe how a board works is to have this river illustration. If you see a river, the river has river banks. And then it's got the riverbed.
で、そしてその下にこう歌唱が、
So the board makes sure that the current of water, which is a picture of the ministry, stays within the riverbed. The water can flow whether fast or slow, but it's the riverbank that allows it. And the riverbank is the one that puts boundaries so that the water does not overflow and there's a flood. So it's the board that makes sure that this water, the current of water, flows, whether slow or fast. And that ministry or the water stays within the riverbed, within its boundaries and the parameters defined by the board policies. So when we think about governance, it would be good to remember this river illustration. There are, of course, many other illustrations that we can use, but this is one that we think really works for us. So the 10 top tips, you will be receiving these slides and the 10 top tips as a summary. But we will be going through each one. It's a tip. So this is the first one. So first tip, the boards need to get clear on the distinction between governance and management. So you know what is governance and you know what is management. And sometimes the differences between board and management is quite subtle and nuanced. But we need to look at the verbs or the words that are being used to describe governance. For example, you have to govern, to establish, to decide, to ensure, and to monitor. And what are the verbs that describe management? And it really boils down to the shades of meaning. What do you mean by govern versus manage? Establish between and versus propose, decide versus recommend, and ensure versus implement, and monitor versus report. So for example, for govern, the boards need to govern or provide oversight and accountability for management. When we talk about management, of course, we have the GS and the staff. And so the boards need to provide oversight and accountability for management, accountability and transparency to the outside stakeholders. While the management manages the work, the daily work, and the staff in achieving the goals of the organization or the movement. Establishes organizational policies and holds management for staying within those policies, while the management stays within the organizational policies set by the board, so they implement it, and so on and so forth. So generally, when we speak about governance, it describes the what of the organization. So they direct and protect. And the management describes or answers the question how. How do they implement? So they implement and they report. So when we talk about the three, sometimes the board members in some movements are actually the ones who are the problems for the movement, because the board member does not know their responsibilities. So it would be good for us to get to know what are the 3 hats that a board member can wear. So there are 3 types of hats. The first is the governance hat. This is the only hat that carries legal authority to govern, and we will discuss it a bit in detail in a bit. So governance hat, volunteer hat, and an implementer hat. The governance hat is the only hat that carries legal authority to govern, and it is only worn when the full board is in session. So when you have a quorum and the decisions that are made only as part of the group wearing this hat. You cannot decide, even if you are a board member, you cannot say, I am a board member, I will decide this and I will implement it, and I will ask the management to implement it. You cannot do that. It's only the decisions made by the group that you have legal authority to govern. And this hat is never worn when working alone. And of course, the executive director or the national director is accountable only to the decisions made by the full board, not by one board. Unless that, of course, that board has been given authority by the full board to direct the national director for specific things. So that's the governance hat. And then I will go to the implementer hat. The implementer hat carries limited authority. It's seldom worn because usually it's the staff that implements the board policies. But it is worn by the board when a board resolution gives this board member authority to implement some board action. Of course, you have many board committees, and different board members are given responsibilities to implement some board action. So the board then takes on the implementer hat, and the hat is removed when the task is done. On the other hand, there is the volunteer hat, and this hat carries no legal authority at all. This is when you leave the board meeting. You're not in session. You don't have a quorum, and this is worn when advising the national director on a personal level. This is worn when you are doing fundraising or when you are helping staff. And often, as a volunteer, you can be under the supervision of the staff. So we need to be clear which hat you are wearing as a board member. So get clear on what boundaries are for the board and for the management. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, regular evaluation of board and general secretary maintains commitment to excellence. Of course, just to ask, what is the goal of board evaluation? This is not a report, not just about changing people, but it is to see a positive change in what you do as a board for the national movement, to learn and grow and to do things differently. You might be learning some things that does not work, so you need to do things differently. Evaluation will help boards function better. And of course, when the boards function well, the national movements will also function well. And with the evaluation, you will see the different things that are changing in your environment, and you need to constantly change as well when your environment changes. To the question, is evaluation an art or a science? Evaluation is actually one of the trainings that the governance development team is doing. So we said that evaluation is more art than science. And there are two kinds of data that we can collect. The hard data, which refers to the numbers, and the soft data. Of course, it's the feelings, the relationships, and just the experiences that you can get. And as a national movement, sometimes our soft data have more significant impact on the organization than the hard data. Because the soft data, they are less visible, they are less tangible, and it's more difficult to measure. Like going into the McKinsey is, they're like board gurus, and he saying about the 7Ss framework. He said that these are the factors that give success to boards. So the boards need to have shared values. They need to have good measures, the hard measures, the data that are needed. So you need to have your strategy, your structure, your systems, and soft measures, the skills that are needed by the board, skills needed by the national director, your staff, and the style of leadership that you have. So that's, there are 4 areas of evaluation that you can do as a board. You evaluate as a whole board. You evaluate individual board members. There is the evaluation of board chair and the evaluation of the general secretary or the national director. And for the IFES, we have available board self-evaluation surveys, which deals with the board culture. This is more a qualitative perspective of your board. You can actually ask Mirek if you want to have a board self-evaluation. A survey can be sent to you and to all your board members, and it will be tabulated and the results will be given to your board so that you can check, are we doing well as a board in the board culture aspect or in the board practice aspect. The board practice is more the quantitative perspective of your board or the technical aspects of your like meetings, etc. So that's tip number 2. And now we go to tip number 3. Sorry, I'm going quickly. I put on my timer. So tip number 3, actively develop trusting relationships, not just within the board, with stakeholders and the public. So trust is on all different levels. And as a board, we need to balance 3 types of important relationships. So we have the relationships with stakeholders. Your movement may have many stakeholders, or those with interest or stake in the ministry. And often these stakeholders have conflicting needs and priorities. So one important relationship is with stakeholders. Then relationship with the management. That's the national director or general secretary and the staff. Those who are doing the day-to-day aspects of the ministry. And sometimes finding the fine line between management and partnership can be a challenge. The effective boards work to partner with the GS and the staff, but on the other hand, they need to provide oversight, direction, and accountability to the management. So there needs to be a balance, and this is one quite important relationship. And another relationship is between board colleagues, between yourselves as board members. And to create and sustain the smart collective IQ needed so that you can make important governance issues and decisions. So as a board, you need to balance debate and maybe straight talk, because you have to be straight with one another. That's your responsibility as a board, to say what you think about these issues. So you need to balance debate and straight talk with active listening, and you need to suspend sometimes your own assumptions, and you need collegial relationships with other board members. So those are the three important relationships: with stakeholders, with management, and with board colleagues. Well, in terms of stakeholders, we have many possible stakeholders in the national movement, and we've listed them down here. We have students, staff, alumni, graduates, volunteers, donors. Of course, you as a board are also stakeholders because you have an interest and at stake in the movement. Of course, churches, society, the local and national government, because we have to give government requirements. The Bureau of Internal Revenue, for example, the Securities and Exchange Commission, we have to give our documents, requirements by these our local and national government. IFES is one stakeholder, and of course, the schools and the school authorities as well as parents are also possible stakeholders. I'm not sure if we forgot any, but there are many possible ministry stakeholders. And in reality, the relationship between our national movement and stakeholders are based on what? It's just based on trust. And trust cannot be taken for granted in any relationship. So all these different stakeholders trust that the ministry will deliver on their expectations of the organizational mission. So speaking of trust, you've heard about Stephen Covey, right? Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he shares that trust can best be demonstrated in 3 ways. And it's shown in this slide. It can be shown through character, competence, and concern. And he gave the illustration that we can think of trust as a bank account. And in this case, we will call it a trust account. So like any bank account, we can make deposits and withdrawals, and we'll also show our balances. And in this case, our trust balance can be either positive or negative. So we establish trust with one entity at a time, with one stakeholder at a time. So we can establish trust with a donor, one donor at a time. So donor 1, donor 2, donor 3, student 1, student 2, student 3. And or with each employee or with each staff. So we can make deposits and withdrawals in these 3 different aspects. So an example of a deposit, of a character deposit, is maybe you do what you say you will do. So that will develop trust. If you do that consistently, then your stakeholders trust you, that you can be trusted with what you're saying. And in the competence area, you are doing it with excellence. And in the concern area, you demonstrate empathy towards the staff or the national director. And of course, a withdrawal is a negative one. You don't do what you promised. You did not do a quality job. And you were indifferent to staff interests. So what happens? In a bank account, if you, like some of you have checks, if you overdraw, you can withdraw so much more than what is in your balance. If things are not corrected when you overdraw your account, what would happen? Of course, if you consistently do that, you overdraw from your account, then there is a possibility that your account will be closed. So maybe a question for us is, like, what would cause a ministry donor to close the trust account with the national movement, for example, or with a specific staff? And what would be the result of that closed account between the donor and the national movement? So that's tip number 3. Now, going to tip number 4. Mirek, I have 5 minutes. My timer. Tip number 4 is to work at improving the efficiency of meetings and decision making. And you will be receiving this as well in your emails, I guess. But I will go through it very quickly. There are 12 steps to get your board working. These are just very specific things. Ensure that you have a functional board with the right composition. In IBCA Philippines, we have 9 board members. In some other movements, they have 12. In other movements, so it depends on your movement. So ensure that you have the right composition. And of course, plan the board meetings and meet. Create an annual board calendar with dates of board meetings so that you can plan ahead. And be sure that you are present in those meetings. Of course, the board chair creates the agenda for each board meeting in consultation with the general secretary. And it's suggested that you include a spiritual input at each board meeting, because this is not just a board meeting, it is also your meeting as a ministry. And of course, the board secretary keeps the minutes to be approved at the following board meeting. Number 4, confirm that each board member understands their roles and responsibilities as individuals and as a whole board. This is taken up in module 3 of the board training. And make sure that everybody clearly understands the ground rules of working together on the board. Number 5, the board leads the organization by maintaining a strategic perspective. You have a higher perspective than the management. So don't be distracted by management issues. One of our phrases that we like to use is, as a board, your responsibility is to put your head in and your hands out. So you put your principles, your policies in, but you allow the management to implement what you have put down in your policies. Of course, review existing policies and create new policies. And then create appropriate board committees. Number 8, ensure that you have adequate organizational capacity by recruiting a suitable general secretary and ensuring that your organization has sufficient finances, staff, and admin support. And this one is very important, number 9. Support and care for your general secretary or your national director. And we need to remember that the general secretary is the only employee of the board. So, and the general secretary is the one that reports to you. Number 10, schedule board development by regular self-evaluation, retreats, and training. So actually, what we are doing now can be referred to or can be a board development. And a question was put here. Just to remind your boards to plan and invite an IFES training for your board, governance development training. And number 11, stay in touch with the university world, because we are working with students and we need to understand our recipients of the ministry. And of course, number 12 and the last, maintain commitment and passion for the ministry throughout your term on the board. You are also an ambassador for the national movement. Now, at this time of pandemic, there are tips for digital board meetings. I think, Mirek, we can just send these to them so that I don't take some part of your time, and they can just read it and we can go on to the next part. So I give this part to Mirek as he does the tip number 5 to tip number 10. Take it away, Mirek.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Christy. Okay, thank you. So I will share my screen now.
Thank you for your prayers. My internet was okay.
Very good. Thank you, Christy. Thank you. Okay, I hope that you can hear me well and that my internet connection will be also stable. And I also hope that you see the screen I'm sharing with you. So this is the continuation of 10 top tips. By the way, on the top of this poster on the right, it says that these tips, they've been identified through more than 200 trainings. So initial trainings, follow-up visits, or coaching arrangements with different boards. So we try to observe, we try to see what's the practice around the IFES globe, how the national boards are functioning, doing, and so this is what we learned from this good practice in IFES context. So the tip number 5 actually goes back again to the area of relationships, but this time this is a little bit more specific than tip number 3. Tip number 3 was talking about the relationship of the board with stakeholders, the management, and within the board itself. Here we talk about the relationship between the board chair and general secretary, and we can say that board chair manages the board, and GS, general secretary, manages the ministry. So this will be the very the basic, very fundamental distinction to make. General secretary always is part of the board meeting. So ex officio is a board member. Usually general secretary has no voting power, but he or she would be always present in the meetings, in the works of the board. So they have different roles, both chair and general secretary. So they should not compete with each other, but they rather partner on the work. And we can also refer to the whole concept of evaluation here, so that this is chair which leads the General Secretary's evaluation, ideally on the annual basis, but not to be a threat, like the evaluation to be a threat to GS, but rather to help him or her to grow in his or her leadership role. So this is actually the most critical relationship, GS, General Secretary, and Board Chair. Why? Because General Secretary needs something like a safety zone. So this is something what Board Chair actually provides to a for the National Director. On one hand, National Director needs to be General Secretary, needs to be supported, and on at the same time, on the other hand, should have a comfort, and please notice what I'm saying here, should have a comfort of being accountable to the board at the same time. So this is the space where he or she can come and receive support and be encouraged, or have the comfort of being accountable to the board. Okay, I'm also I will be also keeping an eye on my watch, so we need to move on. If you have questions, please remember them or write them through chat, and there will be a later time to answer possible questions. So forgive me for moving on. So the next tip I want to bring you to is that the board should understand and focus on the fundamental purpose and mission of the national movement. And what this tip is about, there are different mandates of the board, but the number one, I would say, all are equally important: direction, capacity, performance, and governance. But probably the most fundamental one would be the mandate of providing the direction for the organization, for the ministry. Direction, this mandate talks about establishing the vision, mission, doctrinal basis, statement, core values of the organization. And there is probably no surprise that this tip is on this list of 10 top tips for an effective board, because this is the role of the board to provide the direction, to guide the ministry towards the desired destination. So if the board doesn't understand what's the direction, what's the purpose of the existence of the organization, how can we expect the management level or what is happening down there in the structure to do a good job? So we need to really understand why we exist and what's the direction we want to lead the ministry into. Vision is a clear and precise mental picture of a desired future. This is not what we achieve, it is a direction. So there, I'm sure that you are familiar with these questions. Vision will be asking what we will be thankful for in the next 5-10 years, or whom we will become, what will you be, or what will we be known for. So direction of the ministry, and we have to be aware of this, where we are leading, where we are guiding the ministry entrusted to us. So vision, mission statement would be talking about the future in the present time. And here is this small diagram which can help us to get even better understanding what's the difference between vision and the mission. So general purpose of our existence, why we exist, plus tomorrow it will be a vision. So the direction we move into, and general purpose plus today, this will be the mission. So a small, simple diagram, but I believe it can help us to understand the difference or the distinction between these two concepts. But what is the most important is that as a board, national board, we should be fully aware of this. Was the focus and was the purpose and mission of the national movement. So let me invite you to the next tip. This is number 7, and it says that as a board, national board, we should switch from an operational focus to a strategic view and an outcome mindset. So as a board, we should give space, we should empower the management to do the work, and we should focus on the strategic big picture, strategic view. There is this little diagram which can help us to see the difference between strategic perspective and strategic or operational perspective. So a strategic perspective would be of high importance and usually of low urgency. So this is something what doesn't have to be done today. So perspective, I mean, we are not allowed to fly now. I mean, Christy made it from Manila to her place where she is right now. So she's been flying yesterday. But so this is the perspective, like from a plane out there in the sky with the clear weather, so we can look at the distance. So this is this time like a long perspective, time frame, long mindset, strategic, and we don't want to get stuck into a mindset which would be, I mean, operational mindset. So importance, strategic focus. So external versus internal, future versus present, outcomes versus activity, proactive versus reactive. So we are committed to build organizational capacity, big picture, the destination. We look into the future. And let me show you one more thing here in the context of strategy. Strategy is inbuilt between the purpose, so the vision, and the structure, how we operate on a daily basis. And the board, so the governance would be within this box, which would cover yes, the strategy, the goals, how to achieve the purpose, plans of action, resources. We'll keep an eye on all these things, so it will belong to the strategy. But of course, we give space to the management, to General Secretary and his or her team to implement the things we together decide on. So purpose, strategy, structure. And these 3 points, 2, 3, and 4, they create the strategy. But of course, as I said earlier, we begin with the big purpose, the vision, why we exist. Tip number 8 would talk about policy governance. We govern through a clear and up-to-date policy framework. So this is tip number 8. And this is a really interesting one because policy framework is actually the only tool we have as a board, a national board, to govern the ministry, to govern the organization. The only tool we have available to govern the organization. So policy is a written document used to influence and determine decisions or actions about a specific issue. This will be a course or principle of action adopted by a government, board, management, or individual. But here we talk about the board level, governance level. And this will be a previously made decision or plan to guide future action in specific situations. And maybe it is a good moment to make to comment the situation we are in right now. Some of the policies we might have designed in the past won't work today, won't be applicable to the current situation, to this new normal, or we are on the way to a new normal. So this is a time to revise probably a number of policies so we designed before to address the current challenging times of pandemic and lockdown situations and the online ministry we are in right now. So this would be like a word of encouragement to you all to consider the possibility of revising, redesigning the policies you've developed for your board, for the ministry so far. But let me show you this very, I believe, helpful image illustration of the balls standing one in another. So this is the illustration, the picture of governing the inside by staying on the outside. So what does it mean? Head in, but hands out. The biggest, the largest ball is the national board. Everything else, whatever else is happening in the ministry, in the national movement, is inside of this biggest ball of governance. So when you look from above on these balls, you'll see these circles, and there will be board authority, national director authority, staff authority, and student leaders authorities. But it is all being held by the authority of the board. And there is also this small comment on the screen. You can see it. I believe the distance between the outer boundary and the next one defines those authorities that the board retains for itself. And there will be different scenarios. One board would hold much bigger authority for itself in NGO A. NGO B would keep just a minimum authority for itself. Wise board, I would say, like we have no time to discuss it, to open the floor for a discussion, but I would say, and my conviction is that NGO B is much wiser, because this is like giving space for the hired national director or general secretary and his or her team to do the work. And the board, which tries to keep that much, I mean, so much authority like NGO A, becomes very inefficient, because having keeping so much authority for the board for itself means that we need to be almost like involved in operations, and this is what we want to stay away from. So we design policies and we allow the management team with the general secretary to do the implementation, to be responsible for the operations. And one more tip, this would be number 9 on our list, and this is about developing a mature board which manages turnover rate through a set term limit. It's easy to say a mature board, but what are the characteristics of a mature board, how to measure it, how to define it, what is a mature board. So let me give you a few tips within this tip number 9. So a mature board understands and appreciates good governance principles. This will be probably the most basic comment here. Yes, the mature board knows when a board is a board and when it is not. So we have the power, if I can use this term, as a board when we are in the boardroom, when we are around the board table. So this is when we make decisions. Me individually as a board, I have no power. I can be a volunteer, but I have to be ready to submit to the leadership of a student leader or a staff worker when I want to be directly involved in the ministry. I have the power, and I govern only then when I'm in the meeting with a quorum. So Christy has been already explaining these different heads before. So the second bullet point actually talks also about it, that we need to be aware which hat we are wearing. The board speaks with one voice. A wise board would be speaking with one voice. Boards govern, not manage. And if we would want to do some work, so we we create committees to do board work, but this is not to mess up with management. So this is at our level, again, governance level, so that we do some work through a committee, and of course there must be a purpose for it, and when the work is done, the committee is finished, stopped. And we also already heard it from Christy, that board has just one employee, and this is the Joint Secretary. Maybe a comment about terms of the board. Most common practice for NGOs is to have term limits with 2 consecutive 3-year terms. So this would be a good practice, and I think that in IFES movement, I see in IFES movements that number of boards have adapted it. So 2 consecutive 3 or maybe sometimes 4-year terms. NGOs are constantly in need of new ideas and leadership. So board members who stay for too long, they stop being creative, and so we need this fresh blood coming in. And there is also this one bullet point, which is a little bit tricky here, but you probably agree with me. We have different experiences in our boards, but term limits gives us this diplomatic way of, sorry for a strong word here, of removing non-contributing or non-productive board members of the board. So this is like a win-win situation for both sides. The board chair can say thank you to this non-productive board member when his or her term is or terms are over, and the board who lost interest in the ministry can move on, saying simply that, okay, my term is over, and there are no bad there are no tensions, not like difficult emotions involved in this process of board members like stepping down or moving on to other responsibilities or other ministries. I don't know. But this is a good practice to have a set term length. And the final one, the board needs to engage there must be clear roles, and the board needs to foster confidence and develop a very good team work. And again, there will be a lot to say in this context. So we already saw this diagram that there are different relationships you are involved in. So this time we'll be talking about board colleagues, peers on the board. So relationships, it will be based on trust. Christy has already shown us this trust account concept. We need to respect each other. There should be acceptance, sincerity, mutual accountability, unity, love, etc. And there will be some really interesting team operating principles. Forgive me, I will not stay long on it. You'll receive this slide presentation next week. Yes, we need to honor our commitments. Silence is agreement. So this is a very interesting team operating principle. One of the bullet points, yes. If you don't say a word, if you don't share your opinion in the boardroom, then you say that you agreed. Silence to a decision or to the discussion. Silence is agreement. What is said in the boardroom stays in the boardroom. So confidentiality and so this is something what we should never forget. And yes, we definitely want to be at peace with one another. And yesterday I was sharing about the parable of the talents, and this parable is so rich, so it tells us also a lot about the wise and good board members. So and so we need to show that we are committed, that we are passionate, and we bring our skills. So we want to be willing to work hard, and there should be perseverance or wisdom. So all these characteristics of wise stewards, it all applies to us. So this would be this final, this 10th tip, and you'll be able to reflect on these tips when you receive a copy of the poster, 10 top tips for an effective board, and also the slide presentation. It will be passed to you. So allow me to finish it now, and there is this final quote, yes, from the Bible, Matthew 25. But this is again like not NIV, but IFES version of it, IFES governance program version. Well done, good and faithful board member. So this is what all these 10 top tips should help us with to be effective in our service for the Lord as stewards of the ministry entrusted to us.
We had 2 or 3 questions coming in, and we wanted to keep it for the end, but let's take one at a time. The first question that was asked is there is a concern that the board is becoming too dominant and also too focused on governance. So the question is this a real concern among the, as you give us this training, that sometimes the board can be too focused on governance, too focused and become too dominant?
Can I ask maybe a clarification question? Like, what does it mean to be too focused on governance? I think I saw that question before. Yeah, that's for Percantas.
Yeah.
Daniel. Yeah.
Daniel Ginting.
Maybe Daniel can clarify.
Okay, can Lisman make me the co-host? I see it will work again.
Nelson, we are taking questions first, so.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Daniel, could you clarify, please? We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Hi, Christy. Hi, it's
Hi,
Daniel.
Daniel.
Yeah, just I think one of the I would say not tensions, but always kind of uh, what I call it, two sides of board and staff is that board is seen to be uh, becoming more dominant in kind of it could be said as dictating or but governing or and there is a natural hesitations from staff is that oh whoa stop there for a minute, this is a field work, we know better, don't come into our territory, that sort of things, while from our perspective this is not working, there's something need to be fixed, we need to introduce governance and things. So just just kind of how do you, in your experience, how do you kind of deal with that kind of tensions?
Uh-huh.
I think Mirek can also answer that in a bit, but to define, I think we need to define the term. When you say governance, it is not meddling. Sorry for the word. It's not meddling on the management or the staff's responsibilities. So, in that sense, if the board is going over their boundaries, there is a boundary between the board and management. And as we said, the phrase was head in, hands out. There are actually many case studies that we have in the training itself. The board needs to do the policies, but uh, the staff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. The board needs to do policies, and the staff implements. So the board needs to not just to stay out of the way of the staff. Maybe Mira can say something more.
Yes, I would add here and these two tips we've been looking at, number 3 and number 5, and this is about the relationships. The better we grow the relationships built on trust and accountability, the more secure the situation will be. And for example, number 5, there is a wonderful practice for a board chair to be in a regular contact with general secretary, so that board is well informed what is happening at the campus level, at the ministry level down there. Yes, so they are not detached; they are being filled in with the regular information. There is a really good practice to be in like frequent phone calls, like communication between board chair and the GS. So when the session comes in, the decisions are being made. There is a lot of information which help to make good decisions, not like stepping into the territory of management and respecting each other. So relationships built on trust and mutual accountability, I think this would be a secret of avoiding these tensions. But I also agree that it can happen, that we try to keep the power for ourselves and to dominate. This is definitely not healthy. We should understand our role as those who like provide the parameters, like the river bank. We shape it, but then we give total freedom to people we hired, like general secretary, and he or her hired the rest of the team. So this is not easy, but and it requires some work, but it definitely pays back. So the closer we are with each other, the better relationship is, then the better reality of our functioning.
Thank you both, Mirek and Christy, in dealing with this very delicate question of relationships, tensions, and also the strategic concern of the board. Thank you also, Daniel, for this question. And I think right now we can go back to inviting Dr. Nelson to share with us, and then we'll take the questions again afterwards. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, cool.
Thank you very much for the invitation. You can all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, we had a small technical hitch at the beginning of screen share. My name is Nelson Gitonga. I am advisory committee member for a national movement in Kenya, Focus Kenya. And I have been a board member and a board chair. And I've also had the opportunity to be a Christian Union leader in my university days. So I have seen a lot of the sides of the student work. So thank you, Mirek and team, for inviting me to share briefly the experience that Focus has gone through with regards to COVID and what lessons we can learn. How can the board navigate this very uncertain and disruptive time? How do we make sure that our governance approach is adaptable, flexible enough, and able to quickly respond to the challenges that the national movements face, working with the national director, staff, students, and other external stakeholders and partners who work with the national movements. So I'll just go straight in and dive into the presentation. It's it's a brief one, and then I hope we can continue with the questions thereafter. And then Mirek will conclude the session with a brief section on this area. In terms of, 1 second, I activate something here. I want to start with a quotation from the National Director of the movement in Kenya, or what you call General Secretary in other national movements. By the way, in Kenya, we abandoned the word General Secretary because here it is strongly associated with trade movements. So when we say Mirek is a General Secretary, people want first of all to see which trade union is that. So we use the word National Director. So he said there is no better time to appreciate the value of an effective board than in a crisis situation. Management team needs the urgent, wise guidance of a flexible, strategic, and learning board. And there are many reasons why he said that, and some of the reasons I realized Mirek was alluding to them when he was talking about board structures and policies. And as you know, a lot of movements tend to be very set in particular ways of doing things. We are very strong on tradition. We are very strong on the way we do things and consistency. But sometimes that strength can become a weakness when we face a very uncertain, a very unexpected situation like the COVID-19, which has disrupted many things. So in terms of introduction, as you know, COVID has really impacted all areas of ministry and life, and I will not spend a lot of time on that because the experience, although it is unique in different parts of the world, it has similar impacts. And basically what we have now is disruption. We have a lot of uncertainty and very fluid situation. And some of the things we have tried and tested and believed in have been shaken. But also with that comes new opportunities to learn. One of the things about COVID is that it creates a very good context for change because it's an external contextual factor that actually promotes change on some of the things that we've been doing. And we will be asking ourselves, how can the board guide and shepherd the movement, not only to cope, but also to thrive. So our goal is not only to survive these COVID times, but actually thrive and see what opportunities are coming. So I'll look at three main issues. The first is the impact of the pandemic, and like I've said, I'll not spend much time on that. I'll focus more on the second and the third part. What has been the response of the Focus Kenya governance and management, and what have been the results so far? And then what are some of the emerging lessons that we could share from our experience? And just to say that there is a whole detailed article on the e-governance newsletter. So if you want the full details, you can always have a look at that. And you're also welcome to get in touch with Focus Kenya if you have a specific question or something you'd like to learn. So impact on stakeholders, the first, of course, is a student, because we are a student movement and it's our focus. And as you know, most universities were closed down because of the trying to control the spread of the disease. And initially, some people thought the closure would be brief, but it ended up being almost from March to almost September. And this has disrupted learning and career of the students. Some universities were able to do online learning, but at least in our context, some have not been able. So you can imagine you're seated at home, your studies have been disrupted, and especially final year students suffered a lot. And then even where online classes come in, there are challenges of connectivity, especially in the rural and remote areas. And of course, the costs of connectivity. And then you are seated at home and your dad has no job, your mom has no job because maybe they've lost a job. So serious economic issues. On our graduates, one unique thing about Focus Kenya is that we also have a very strong graduate ministry, and these graduates are the ones that support the work financially and in kind, and also being available. Because of the lockdowns, there are a lot of job losses, low business activity, pay cuts, and all that. And this impact on livelihoods even challenged how well they were able to support focus work. And that directly brings the problems of financing of the ministry. Some online but again, that one, there was challenge of participation because of the connectivity issues I've raised. Our universities have been very dramatically impacted by COVID because of the disruption of learning. And with the prolonged closure, there were major issues of financial sustainability because our universities operate on fees. And not all universities are created equal. Some were able to do online classes, some have not been able. And then with the current ongoing reopening of universities, there are very major challenges redesigning the physical space to accommodate on-campus students within social distancing requirements. So big issues there. Coming home closer, focus. As usual, there have been serious disruption and postponement of important ministry engagement. And usually the March to July season in focus is very busy. I can give you an example. Our annual general meeting is held in April, and so that one was postponed. And it was a very important meeting because we were having a transition in the board chair. Then we have various ministry activities. I don't want to give details. And in addition to that, board meetings could not happen because of the lockdowns, and also board committees that are very effective in running the governance issues of focus also are held up. And although we know, as we'll see ahead, that there was a lot of online activities that came, the change didn't happen just suddenly as one would expect. Also in this year, we normally have an internship program for graduates, which also had to be deferred, which is a major thing for focus because the internship program, which you call STEM, supports a lot of Christian unions with staff workers and a lot of Christian organizations with people they can depend on to move a lot of activities. So that was a major event. We had major graduate conferences and leadership training, triennial missions, all those were put aside. And like I said, because we're comfortable and happy in the way we do our things, these changes had a dramatic impact even on people spiritually, psychologically, and wondering what is going to happen. So how did the governance and management respond? We picked 3 issues. First is adaptation of the board decision-making structures and processes, and I would add here even policies. I saw Mirek spent a lot of time talking about governance through policy. Then they did a very quick situation analysis and risk assessment, and in order to develop a mitigation plan, a contingency plan, how do you make sure that governance activities continue, ministry continues, we can sustain staff, we can sustain our activities, we can take care and protect staff and students, and then implementation of very specific short to medium term strategies to make sure that there is continuity. So we'll look at these 3 in the next few minutes. So in terms of adaptation of board decision-making structures and processes, the Focus Kenya is governed by a constitution, and under the constitution we have board charters and governance manuals and all that allow the board to create standing and ad hoc committees to address issues. So that provision was quickly activated, and a team was formed called the reference team. Basically is a committee of the board, an ad hoc committee of the board, and it was made up of the critical offices of the board chair, vice chair, treasurer, and national director. Please note I have talked of offices because it's about function, not necessarily these are the most powerful people in the board. You know, that's how people see it in another perspective. And then this team that is small and focused was created so that they can be able to be a flexible, quick, and fast decision-making committee of the board to have a very short and fast communication and feedback loop from the national director and other external stakeholders and governments, because government was also issuing a lot of directives every day on how to conduct ourselves. And in addition to this, as you know, these committees also eventually report to the main board, but this committee was given a free hand to meet as many times as necessary, communicate as often as necessary, and take any emergency decision that was required, and then later on report to the regular board meeting. I think this is an important thing because for movements like Focus that are large and have very well-structured boards and board committees, everything is very set and a little bureaucratic sometimes. And sometimes to cause the ship to suddenly stop moving in the way it was going and start operating in high-speed sprint was quite a big thing. But I think this is something that helped the board. Next was doing a very quick situation analysis and risk assessment in order to do a contingency plan. So this involved the board discussing with the national director and various ministry directors and giving them the mandate to go out, collect information, do quick analysis, interview staff, interview students and our partners, and decide how do we position ourselves to ensure continuity. So some of the issues that were tackled includes resource mobilization, like I said, with the closures of university, with the stoppage of physical meetings and various meetings that we have as Focus, with the laying off of many people, they have no jobs, and pay cuts, issues of financial support came in. So really it's a question of what are the innovative strategies that we can have, what are the relevant ways that we can continue mobilizing resources, how do we diversify our sources to make sure that the ministry continues even in this environment. Then even more important than resource mobilization is resource management. How does the board chair support the national director and the team to do financial projections and scenario planning? So what if the revenue of Focus, the income, drops by 70% or by 60%? What activities or what costs can we suspend? What things cannot be suspended? And very interesting discussion, and it brings up that issue of trust and how well the board and the national director work together, how well the staff trust the board, and even external stakeholders, because in the case of Focus, this even had to lead to an agreement that on a short-term period, a good number of the staff were to go on half pay, for example, because of sudden drop in income. So resource management, very important. And then setting up a risk, constantly collect information, feedback, and decide how do we respond. And most important, a communication strategy. Whenever there is a situation like this, a lot of things, there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of new information coming every day. There's a lot of uncertainty. As you can see, even governments are embarrassing themselves. Today they say, we are opening. Tomorrow they say, no, we are not opening. There is this problem. So same thing again, even at governance level, if you're not careful, you can create confusion and destroy trust. So the issue of communication is very important. You need to communicate adequately, frequently, with a lot of honesty and integrity, including saying we don't know. I think it's important for boards when we don't know to say we don't know, it's uncertain, but this is what we have decided for this week or for next week. And when additional information comes in, we'll be able to manage that. And then finally, the other third major thing the board did was to implement certain specific strategies to keep the ministry going. The first one is digital migration. As you know, I don't know about other ministries, but our student movements, but the digital platform has been something good to have, but not something that we thought was extremely important for the survival of a student ministry and the work. But now it has become a very important thing for making a movement be resilient and survive in this environment. So really a shift to online meetings of the board and board committees, and a shift to management itself having its own meetings online, especially the first 3 months when there was total lockdown. The online platform was extremely important and keeping things going. And I think this speaks to us about the current world we are living in and the future that is going to come, that the online platforms are now no longer a luxury. They eventually are going to become very integral parts of how we design our ministries. And for the first time in the history of Focus, I think since 1970 or earlier, we had our annual general meeting through Zoom. I mean, very interesting experience. And one of the surprising things is that actually that was the best attended AGM of Focus. So very many new lessons coming up, that by having this on, we even had people in the diaspora actually attend the annual general meeting, participate in the decision-making processes. Then of course, scriptural engagement, very, very important. We must maintain focus on God's call and God's mandate for us in the current world. The fact that there is COVID it has not surprised God, it has not changed his call for us to be the salt and the light. So Focus developed 2 free online Bible study guides to help students and graduates do scriptural engagement regarding what does COVID mean, how should Christians respond, and what is our responsibility. And these are available freely online. And then, of course, maintaining prayer through weekly Facebook Live prayers. And more important, the psychosocial and material support and peer counseling that was needed. I did say that these closures have created a very serious emotional and mental strain for students, for graduates, and even for staff. There are people who have lost loved ones. There are people whose businesses have been totally disrupted. There are families that have never sat together for many years, and now they are locked up in a house. Many issues. And so the psychosocial peer counseling also came in extremely handy. So these are examples of some of the things that Focus did. The first one there really is one of the Christian unions having its meetings online. Very creative student. All this is student initiative. The prayer hour through Facebook Live, and of course the counseling and peer support for students in distress and who have very serious issues around them. This is an example of training for CU. Focus conducted training for executive committees and ICT committees of the Christian Union to help them to do the digital migration. And up there is our AGM that was held on Zoom. And also Focus developed an app which is downloadable, and through that app, you can access a lot of the services available in Focus Ministry. So these are some of the things that the products that come out when the board works together closely with the national director, supports the management to be able to respond and create the boundaries and the security that that management can innovate and bring feedback to the board for decision making and ratification. So what are some of the lessons that we can glean from this? I think we need to relook at our governance system, processes, structures, and policies. And we need to make them adaptable and agile. I think this is a lesson that everybody is learning. It's not just national movements, any institution, any organization, even individuals and families are beginning to learn that you need to relook at the way we do our things. One of the things we normally say is that while the content of our work is sacred or maybe sacred, the method is not sacred. The method is our own creation to respond to our environment. And when the environment changes, we must be willing and ready to change the way we do things. There are people who think that a board meeting is not a board meeting until they've had face-to-face, they've had their debates, and they have made decisions, and they have ratified. Now you have to do that through your phone, you have to do that through your laptop, and it is as serious as a face-to-face meeting, and you have to make very serious decisions on an online platform. I mean, that is a new experience for many people. We have to look at policies. Some of us have governance manuals or constitution that says the board can only meet 3 times a year, full stop, and it can only meet from this time to this time, and this is what will happen. So all that has been thrown out. The question is, what is going to work for us? How does the board meet? How do the board committees meet? And how do we make sure that things continue? So if this really is the most important lesson from COVID, that we must be flexible, we must be willing to change. And sometimes we are not very good in this one because we think that the method that Mirek and Nelson developed 10 years ago is the most spiritual method, and any other one is suspect. So virtual migration, digital migration, I think I said this, that virtual platforms are now a critical component of a resilient ministry design. So if your ministry does not have a strong digital strategy and platforms, I think that there are challenges that will come, because this is Corona, tomorrow could be something else. Then financial resilience, the importance of leveraging innovative and relevant fundraising approaches, and especially ensuring that student movements begin to create some reserves, whether in financial or in kind. I think IT people call it redundancy. I do understand that a lot of national movements, sometimes including Focus, operate on shoestring budgets, and they spend every shilling they get or every dollar or pound. But I think this, again, people in financial management and governance, this is a big issue that is coming up. How do we manage the resources? And how do we make sure we have a small reserve for at least enabling the movement to continue operating? I think our core values are very critical, and I think the board has a critical role in drawing the attention of the national director and management and other stakeholders to our core values and rally everybody around our core values. Because in times of distress and in times of uncertainty, not every change that comes, not every new idea that comes is good. And I'm sure you have seen it at the political level, at the institutional level, and even at organizational level. There are people who take advantage of these seasons to push things that are not godly or are against the purposes of God. So we need to be very clear about our core values, and especially scriptural engagement, to discern God's voice and find meaning and purpose even in times like this. Then the other one is holistic ministry approaches. It's very important to realize that we've been called to minister to the whole person. So you cannot, like the Bible says in the book of James, find somebody who is hungry and naked and say, be warm, be well fed, I'll pray for you. That's good, but you must go beyond that. How can our national movement, beginning internally, are we concerned, or are we addressing the issue of the national director and his management team? They are also families, they are also people, they are also affected by COVID. So how do we support them to make sure that we create the best environment for them to carry out their work? And then going all the way to responding to the current economic and emotional stresses that arise from COVID. Then, of course, bigger questions, very big questions. As you know, COVID has exaggerated the inequalities that are there in society, inequalities that are there in governance and economic systems. And as part of our holistic ministry, as part of our integral missions, I think national movements are also being called upon to advocate and promote more inclusive economic system, more inclusive governance systems at the regional, national, and even global levels. Some of the decisions and choices that have been made by governments and institutions regarding COVID have disadvantaged some people and advantaged others. Some of them resources that have been allocated for COVID have gone to other political issues. And you may say this may be outside the scope of national movement board, but unfortunately Jesus said although we are not of the world, we are in the world, and these things affect our associates, our students, and we are called upon to ask those bigger questions. Then learning strategies, very important to learn. What are the lessons that are coming out of COVID? How can we codify or document some of the lessons that we are learning? What things are working? Which ones are not working? What has COVID revealed to us about who we are as a board, as a national movement, as management? You know, COVID is like a mirror showing us who we are. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? And so how can we be better prepared tomorrow for the next COVID? And then, of course, finally, the issue of our vision, very, very important, just like the core values that I said. How do we make sure that we remain focused on our vision as national movements? Eventually, boards and management have a mandate and a responsibility to support the growth and development of believers, a body of believers, a community of believers that are resilient, prayerful, faithful, hopeful in affliction, and also well-grounded, and who continue to be agents of God's transformation, even in the midst of COVID. And actually, like we know in scripture, times like these are actually times of great opportunity for ministry. So how do we seize this opportunity to extend the reach of our student work within our countries? And so just to wrap it up, three things we put up that we could do as board members, and the details are available in the detailed article. But basically is, if we haven't done so already, is to conduct a situation analysis or risk assessment and develop a contingency plan. The idea is not to do a very complicated process, but a very quick and simple process that helps you to know what are the risks we are facing, how big are these risks, what is the likely impact of these risks, and how do we respond to this, and what opportunities are within these risks that we could leverage or seize, and then implement this in a very flexible way, and in a way that we monitor very closely and make course corrections as needed. And then it's important to make some short-term and other longer-term changes in the way we govern ourselves as national movements, as boards, looking at our board systems, board structures, policies and processes, and also management level, and make sure that our governance systems, our management systems, our ministry systems are agile, are effective, are able to quickly change and respond to the environment. And finally, I would challenge us to evaluate and rate our national movement board. How agile are we? How flexible and adaptable is the movement? How good are we in listening to the national director, to other stakeholders that are giving us feedback about our governance and our leadership, and also other feedback from institutions that impact our national movement. And thirdly, the learning. How well is the board good at learning, at growing, at evaluating itself? And those areas where we think we are not doing well, we need to make some plans to improve and get better. But most important, to make sure that our governance processes and systems are flexible and adaptable. Thank you very much. I think over to you, Mirek, or
Well, I think that it will be over to Annette or Lisman. I think that there were questions, and I think that this will be time for Nelson to respond, or yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mirek. We'll take one question to Dr. Nelson first before I hand it over to Mirek to continue. And the question was on the point that you mentioned on resource management. This person is in the chat, has said that we did have a disagreement on some of these points about resource management. The board wanted to cut costs by 20% and freeze hiring for new staff. But the pushback was that not to limit God's work, that he would fulfill everything. So we would appreciate your take or your thoughts on this, this response that was received.
thank you very much. A very interesting question. It brings to mind a book the former IFES General Secretary shared with me called Administry. How do we balance our responsibility to manage our institutions and our organizations with current resources vis-a-vis maintaining our faith and our confidence that God will supply greater things? How do we reconcile faith that God will supply vis-a-vis making sure budgets balance and we're able to meet our obligation? I think for me, the first thing I would respond to this is, how did the board arrive at a decision to reduce cost by 20%? What was that based on? Was it based on a proper situation analysis that was inclusive, participatory, where the national director and management also had the opportunity to give data and information? If the cost cutting is based on an inclusive and consultative situation analysis, including some hard financial projections and numbers, because sometimes people who are arguing do not have the same level of information and understanding. I think that can reduce that kind of friction. And so that whatever decision is arrived at, there are options that are based on the information that has been collected through management and through the national director and presented to the board. Various scenario, I talked about scenario planning, that there is option A, option B, option C. And each option, if we take this decision, these are the pros, these are the cons. I think this is something that the board must engage with together with the national director and select an option which most of them are comfortable living with the consequences, and also have a time frame for reviewing the decision. The other thing also is that in a situation like this, it is not so much who is right and who is wrong. It is really what do we need to do now to keep the movement going. So I think our answer is that yes, we are not limiting God's work. We are being prudent managers of the resources that God has given us. We are being responsible managers of the money that is in the bank right now, even as we trust God to provide more tomorrow. So when it comes to believing God, we believe God for great resources. When it comes to budgeting and planning, we budget and plan with what is available. And I think we need to be humble enough to say it's a discovery, it is a journey. There is nobody with right or wrong answer. We normally say what is the most appropriate option for this situation. And the board should be flexible enough to be willing to change its position should additional and new information come. For example, maybe we have projected in our situation analysis that income is going to fall by 60% in the next 2 months. And we plan on the basis of that. Then along the way, as we collect information, we find actually income has only dropped by 10%. Okay, again, we can come back and review our decision. For example, in the case of Focus, the 20 to 25% salary cut was only for a certain period. And after that, as more resource mobilization was done and appeals to various supporters and more money came in, then quickly that decision was adjusted. So that's why I talked of flexible and agile governance and management systems. It's really not casting everything in stone. But also this also may reveal, remember I said that COVID-19 is a mirror that is revealing to us who we are. So for me, again, I would take this as a lesson that there could be an issue about trust, there could be an issue about communication, and there could be an issue about how board and management engage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. If I heard you correctly, you held up 4 things. The first one was about how inclusive we were in that decision making, and then having options and choosing the best option, and that option would be reviewed in time, and then having the flexibility to change according to what we see. So thank you for that very helpful way of thinking about this issue that or tensions that we face.
Thank you.
Right now, I would like us to proceed with Mirek to share on her caring for the General Secretary, and so that we can end this, take a break and come back for the full question answer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Annette. Actually, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Nelson for this wonderful presentation. I think that you all answered so many questions, I mean, which were raised before about the relationship between the board and management and possible tensions and who does what. And so this story, what you shared with us from Focus Kenya, is wonderful example of a very healthy, built on trust relationship between board and management. You referenced team you mentioned, you started your sharing with reference team consisting of board chair, vice chair, and treasurer and national director. It shows that they work really closely together, and so there is this wonderful trust and partnership. Let me then share now a few things about this big topic of caring for General Secretary. And let me do it this way. I will skip many slides, so I want to have them on my left also. And I will try to go quickly through some main points. I'm sure that many of you heard this saying that people join organizations but leave their bosses. So if we do not care well for our employees, then this is only a matter of time when trouble or problems come. People are fascinated, might be passionate about the purpose and our vision, why we exist, but then when they join in and they are mistreated or they get into some difficult relationships with people, they leave, but not because they lost their commitment or their passion for the vision of the organization, but this is usually about people, bosses or supervisors. So in the case of General Secretary, the board is the employer of General Secretary. Christy has said earlier that board has only one employee, and this is General Secretary. So this relationship between the board and the General Secretary is very, very important. And we can ask this question: how can we care for someone who is constantly on the front line, General Secretary, who is involved in intense self-giving, who is facing challenges coming from all possible directions? How do we care? How do we support the General Secretary in his or her daily work? How do we care for someone who feels like, okay, and now don't be scared by or put off by this list of things you see on the screen. When you just scan these different things listed here, does anything come to your mind? Do you know what these things, where they come from? I'm sure that you are not surprised now. These are Apostle Paul's autobiographical sections in his second letter to Corinthians. You have the passages mentioned there, 4th, 6th, and 11th chapter. So this is what Paul has been going on, has been going through in his ministry, hard pressed on every side, perplexed, persecuted, struck down in great endurance, in troubles, hardships, distresses, and of course we cannot compare with this what Apostle Paul has been going through, but there are moments and situations when the reality of General Secretary's work is not that far from this what Paul describes in 2 Corinthians. So the big question would be here: what would it mean to provide support and care for Apostle Paul? What does it mean to provide support and care for the National Director, for the General Secretary? Especially now, we've heard from Dr. Nelson, the COVID-19, like mentioned so many times because he was presenting the Focus Kenya response to this current challenge in this very context of the pandemic of COVID-19. And I'm sure that we all experience the same, that online ministry blurs a fine line between work and personal life. So online sessions, Zoom sessions like now, so it all makes the General Secretary's full-time work becomes literally like 24/7 job, and no division, a very sensitive relationship between work and personal life. And when we lose the balance, we head towards a trouble. So when you look back at the crisis in a few years' time we are in now, what will you wish you had done as a board in terms of caring for General Secretary? Let me suggest 4 points and then maybe a few very practical tips and hints, and one illustration again from the Bible, from the New Testament. I would like to leave with you in the context of caring for General Secretary. The WISE board takes care of the national movement assets, but not only physical and financial ones, but also the human ones. And here, national director comes in. So the WISE board, through usually board chair, would talk and pray together with the national director. And this is in between, this is beyond the board sessions. I already mentioned before, talking about 10 top tips, that there should be relationship, there should be opportunities for the board chair and the general secretary getting together, talking, chatting about the ministry, but also about his or her personal life, family life, the well-being, and there should be a time to pray together. So number one, talk and pray together with national director, general secretary. But then this is also one is a very kind of obvious one and fundamental one, that we should develop open and honest communication between board and national director, or board chair and national director. We need to be an encouragement through an open dialogue, communication, regular communication. We should be able to bring counsel where needed, or yes, to build this relationship of trust and accountability. The next thing, how we can support national director, is to bring balance to activities. The board is not involved directly in the ministry, so we keep this, I believe, healthy distance. So we keep our head in but hands off. So we have also this right perspective on things, and sometimes we can be like a brake, sometimes like an accelerator. So we can, or we should be able to bring balance to activities to help to avoid the burnout situation. And what goes together with is also that we should be able to help national director to think through difficult or complex issues. And this is what I have already mentioned, that board is one step removed emotionally, and can often bring a more objective assessment to complex issues. But now, if you ask me for being very specific here in caring for General Secretary, I would bring to you the list of simple 12 different tips. And let's go very quickly through it. We'll send you it later after this session. Yes, you begin with clear job description. You through a regular contact with General Secretary, you help to plan priorities for the academic year ahead. You strategize together, and this is about his or her personal life. I'm not talking about the ministry. This is about him or her. You regularly schedule fair and objective evaluation. So when it is when it is like part of the relationship, like regular evaluation, it doesn't come as a threat. So it is to help to find the strengths and to spot some areas for improvement. Then number 4, personal growth plan, like for spiritual direction. We talk that this is a spiritual ministry. This is a Christian work we are part of. So how of the spiritual development of the leader of this ministry? So we cannot be naive that he or she will be able to balance it all out of his own or her strengths only. So we should assist General Secretary in this spiritual journey also. So we want him or her to be the best possible leader in the country for our NGO, for our ministry, for our organization. Have we ever thought about providing opportunities for learning new skills? So let's not forget about this, that we want to invest into his or her leadership skills. Patterns of work, how these daily, weekly, monthly, and annual patterns of work look like. He or she says that they are overworked, but maybe a good piece of advice can help to bring balance to the things which he or she is stretched by, but can be delegated to someone else, or can be like left for later, because this is not the most important issue or area at the moment. Point number 7, we ignore it so often. Annual vacation, time for rest, physical rest, completely away from work. And I should probably keep my mouth shut here, because if you talk to my wife, I'm not a really good example of it. Even on annual vacation, which we try to have with my wife, I would usually have my laptop with me and do the work, which is not good. I mean, but I make this public confession. Try to help your national director to be disciplined with taking time away from work. Welfare of the family. Ask the spouse, how are they doing? And honest discussion. When my wife is very much involved in the pastoral care and counseling ministry, when she sits with usually like a senior staff worker of whatever country, the first part of the conversation is about these wonderful things he or she is doing and how great the ministry is. But when the question is asked about him or her personal well-being or spiritual life, silence, tears, and the real conversation begins. So welfare of the family, like physical, spiritual. So this is so important. Salary benefits. When as a board you revised the salary, like when was the last time when you looked at money issues? They need to live on the money you provide, the salary you provide. So very specific point also. Employment contract, is it in place? Health insurance, pension scheme. I'm a bit older than most of you, or much older than most of you, and believe me, that it was only recently when I started, okay. I'm not the student age anymore. I'm not the staff age anymore. Like, do I have any pension scheme? Be proactive in thinking about these things. And this is how you can bless the people you have available in the ministry. And the last point I want to bring to you is a periodic update of his or her expected length of service. This is so important. If you cross this certain point, there is usually no way back to your profession, or at least very difficult to return to your previous profession or to this what you studied at university. So a written format, 3 more years, or this is you a long, like a lifelong calling. Okay, is your decision, but I want you to be aware that at some point it will be almost impossible or very difficult to return to a secular job environment or to move on to something else. So this simple 12 points, ideas, tips should help us to care in a very practical way for the national director. And because we want to give enough time for questions, let me just show you something, like two more things. There is this matrix of support and challenge. There are seasons in in the ministry or in the work of any one of us, actually, but definitely we talk about the national director here, that sometimes he or she does too much, but there will be situations, moments when there will be this low season because of the tiredness or maybe burnout challenge. So from time to time, we need to move from challenge to support, from support to challenge. We cannot be an absent board. How we can bless our employee, the general secretary, is to provide support and challenge in the balanced way, in the right moment. So the right balance allows to deliver the best results for the organization when these two things come together: support and challenge. And so that we could see that this is not only the concept from textbook of the management course. Please allow me to take you to the Bible for a few moments, and specifically this is first letter to Thessalonians. Apostle Paul is talking about very personalized pastoral care for staff workers. Let me put it this way. Apostle Paul is saying in 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 8, "We loved you so much, we're delighted to share with you not only the gospel, but gospel of God, but our lives as well." But then see what else he is writing. First Thessalonians 2nd chapter, verse 7. Paul says that as a pastoral leader, he was gentle among the believers in Thessaloniki, like a mother caring for her little children. But a few verses later, he says, "For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, exhorting, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God." So Paul caring for believers, we can say Paul caring for staff workers, was sometimes like a mother, sometimes like a father. Mother caring for little children. When a small child is crying, usually this is the mother who is comforting this little child. But when this little child needs to be disciplined, usually this is the father. So this is his role to exhort, to urge, and to bring in order this little small child. So mother and father, we see it in this what Apostle Paul was bringing to the believers in Thessaloniki, in the way how he was caring for staff workers. Let me put it this way. And now, just to close my short sharing on this topic, let's have a look at the wonderful, beautiful painting by Rembrandt, "The Return of the Prodigal Son." So this is from Luke's Gospel, chapter 15, "Return of the Prodigal Son." It is a wonderful, amazing illustration of pastoral care, which needs to be personalized. You have the prodigal son kneeling in front of the father, and you have the father embracing the son who just returned home. Of course, it would be nice to have yes, a platform to share so that you could speak. Does anything catch your attention on this painting? just let's reflect, or let's look at this painting for a few moments. And let's focus just on these two men, father and the son. Okay, let me show you the next slide, the next picture, father and the son. Hands of the father. Can you see something special about the hands? Right hand and the left hand, different hands, masculine and feminine hands. So this is a beautiful, wonderful illustration of this, what Paul was telling us in his letter, first letter to Thessalonians, like a mother, like a father. So caring for General Secretary, bringing this encouragement and challenge from time to time. Yes, this is applying this wonderful, beautiful biblical lesson Apostle Paul taught us in First Thessalonians 2nd chapter. So caring for General Secretary, National Director, follow the example of Apostle Paul, and let's remember the wonderful painting of Rembrandt, The Return of the Prodigal Son. So this is the last slide I want to show you. Personalized care is not necessarily caring for people in the way they want, but in the way they need to be cared for. In order to support people effectively, in order to support General Secretaries effectively, we must start with where they are at this very moment. So we need to see in them a leader of the ministry, but we need to see in them a human being, a brother or sister in Christ who need help, who need support, and maybe also accountability and challenge. But we must start where they are at this very moment. So let me finish here, and you'll receive some of these slides so that you'll be able to reflect a little bit more on these things later. But this is so important, so crucial for the success of the ministry, that we care for the people the Lord entrusted to us well. So Annette,
Yes.
over to you.
Before we move to the break, I would like to give us a 10 minutes break. But there was a question that came early on in the first session already that is connected to this session that you have just done. And I'd like to ask it now, which is, if there is a heated tension between or conflict between the General Secretary and the board chairman, then who should be the one to step in to resolve this situation?
Yeah, it's a very, very good and big question. At the same time, I think that if situation like this happens, people see it. You cannot hide, this kind of difficult, tense relationship, especially between the board chair and General Secretary. So it's delicate, sensitive. I would say that others who are on the board, those who would be among the more mature in terms of experience and maybe age, depending on the culture, age would be a very important element. Those people, board members, should take courage to, yes, confront the board chair. I would begin with board chair, because he or she should be more mature in this relationship. He or she should be responsible for developing good relationship with national director based on trust and all these other things we've been talking about. Of course, it's very difficult to design even a policy about it, but if there are good relationships also within the board, there should be freedom, there should be space for open conversations, open talks, maybe not in public, not in the board room, not in the meeting, but personally, and then if it doesn't help, then maybe some others should be invited to join in to talk to the board chair. And this is where I would definitely begin. I wouldn't go to national director behind the back of chair unless you were asked to do it, unless you've been given this task to talk on behalf of the board to General Secretary. The conversation, communication, when we talk, this is usually the best way of resolving this kind of things. If we don't talk, even if we don't confront, like in the conversation, in the dialogue, these kind of situations, they will not go away by themselves. So they need to be talked through, and yes, this will be probably my hope, that someone on the board will be mature enough to notice it and to bring some solution.
Thank you, Mirek. Christy or Dr. Nelson, do you want to say something?
Can you hear
Yes.
me? My internet is going on and off.
Go ahead, Christy.
I am a national director, and maybe I'll I'll let others answer the question.
Okay, let me give you my few cents worth of my thinking. Most movements at some point, depending on how long they have been there, will go through an experience like this. And even in Focus, we've gone through that many years ago. And one of the things that has happened also is to relook at our structures. And what we did in Kenya is that we created an advisory committee. It has no power whatsoever to make any decisions for the movement, but it acts like a council of elders or something like that, so that when the board, between board members or between the board member and the GS, there are issues that they are unable to resolve using their internal mechanisms, they can come to us and we can have a seat and in a very open and mature and free and frank way discuss the issue. So the advisory committee has been very helpful in trying to resolve some of those things. So again, experience teaches you to keep improving your structures. Thanks.
Thank you. So from Mirek, what we heard is actually maybe other mature board members could be the ones who initiate talking to the chairman, and only if empowered then to talk directly to the national director. And from Dr. Nelson, that there is value in having an advisory board who do not have a decision making power, but they act as elders who advise and who give that kind of pastoral advice as well. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. You know, I'm so thankful for this kind of session that we have been able to have since last night, hearing different aspects of being a board and different aspects of governing the movements that the Lord has entrusted us to. So we have another at least half an hour to 40 minutes of question and answer. And I would like to start by asking the questions that have already come in. But if you have questions and you would like to write them in the chat or ask them by yourself, please do so. But let me start with the early on questions. And any one of the three of you, either Dr. Nelson, Mirek, or Christy, you could attempt to answer them. The first question is, IFES is a student-led or student-initiated movement. So how does the reality shape the purpose and direction, the way the board should set the purpose and direction of the ministry? How much do we need to hear the student voices? How can we consider the student voices? So I repeat the question. IFES is a student-initiated movement. How does the reality shape the way the board should set the purpose and direction of the movement or the ministry? How much do the student voices need to be heard?
I'm sure that Christy and Nelson can add a lot to this question, but let me begin. We encourage all IFES boards to invite students to be part of national boards. So this is the student's voice. This is what we need to hear, not only like asking accidental questions here and there, but they should be part of the structure. They should be part of the board and to have a say in making, in shaping the decisions, in making the direction for the ministry. There are some great examples, beginning with already with IFES International Board. There are 2 students always, like yes, for 2 terms. Am I right? For 2 terms they stay, but so this is an example to follow for national boards. In Francophone Africa, they have students on every single national board, Francophone Africa, IFES region, one of the IFES regions. In Germany, the structure is pretty complicated, but they have a whole group of students who they form at the national level. This is like a student board, and they have a lot to say, to contribute. So in the past, it wasn't always the case, but thankfully for some years, there was this trend, there is this trend of inviting students into official structure of the board, to be official members of it. Of course, yes, there are some technical challenges, because students finish their studies, they move on, and you want to be a student always as part of the board. So, but there are ways how to solve it. So my strong recommendation would be to bring students into the structure to be part of the board.
Christy or
Okay, I can like yes. In addition to what Mirek has said, like inviting students to the board, but of course we need to be choosing students who are mature enough to handle all the debate or straight talk that happens within the board, and the confidentiality of all the issues that might be discussed in the board. But that to say, yes, there are movements who have put students on their board. But also in addition, I think we need to get input from students. Like, I think I'm thankful for our board. Recently, we did our strategic planning for the new millennium. And the board coming back to us and saying, because the staff were planning and we had very limited time to get input from both the students and the graduates, and the board said, go back and then get input and then come back to us so we can decide more fully. So getting input from students, or maybe even inviting students to come to the board meeting to like just to get students' ideas and thoughts about, for example, some issues that the board might be wanting to put on the table. So maybe Nelson can also add some more.
Thanks, Christy and Mirek. Yes, I reiterate and support what you have said, that it's very important to have students in the board, and beyond that, to make sure that their participation is part of the constitution of the movement. It is not based on this chairman likes the students, so they are on the board. Then another chairman comes and doesn't want students and they are out. The other thing also is giving the example of also this English speaking area of IFES, is that in addition to students being on the board, a lot of the movements in this region also have a very strong National Students Executive Committee, or if you want to call it a board. And these leaders are elected by students themselves. They are a very important part of the student ministry. They deliberate on the issues around students. They even evaluate information and bring it to the board. And the board actually, and the management actually allocates resources and training for this National Student Executive Committee. And just like Christy has said, for example, in Focus Kenya, we are in the process of developing our new strategic plans, and the input of Christian unions is extremely important in making sure that students participate. There's always a risk sometimes of student ministry looking like it is driven by the general secretary or the national director and management, and students are observers. So that's the other risk we have to constantly manage, and make sure that this student movement is driven by students. And all of us, the management, national director, board, we are just facilitators, we are just mentors. And to say also that also when we are doing leadership election or appointment, to also work with the former students. We have that strong tradition in Focus Kenya, that when you have positions in the board, when you have positions in management, we really prefer, it's not a must, but we prefer former students who are in the Christian Union, because that shows that other student that this really is our movement. Because that national director, I remember he used to be in this university and was in this Christian Union. So we maintain that connectivity, and students can see how their life will progress in the student ministry. Thanks.
Thank you. So at 3 key levels, Mirek is talking about having them on the board, and that's a possibility. Dr. Nelson is talking about having a student executive committee as a national movement. And Christy is talking about spaces where students can participate in the strategic direction and planning of the movement. Their voice is heard, and there are other suggestions. Thank you very much. The second question that has come up is, how do we inspire regular evaluation for both the GS and the board? How do we put this in place? I mean, how do we, yeah.
Okay, so maybe I will begin again. I think that it should be made like a part of our functioning. Like it should be a daily practice. I mean, if we can talk about daily practice in the board, because the heartbeat is, the pace is pretty slow, like a few meetings a year. But anyway, if this is in our documents that we want to evaluate General Secretary annually, so every year towards the end of the year or the beginning of the year, so that we sit together, there will be different forms. There might be a questionnaire, there might be a survey to ask questions. This might be in the form of a conversation with a board chair or someone designated to ask for this role. And but there it must become a part of the culture of the board evaluation. I think that we've already mentioned it today, that when it is like an accidental kind of evaluation, it's always received, taken as a threat, a signal, aha, I did something wrong, so they want to evaluate me, and most probably I will be fired, or there will be some severe consequences of this evaluation. And this is not the intention. This is not the idea behind evaluation. We should redeem the concept of evaluation by making it a part of the culture of the way how we operate, how we function. So yes, General Secretary has to be evaluated, but before getting into the evaluation of General Secretary, we should start with ourselves. I think that we will have no right to try to evaluate General Secretary if we don't do our a self-evaluation. So self-evaluation of the whole board, evaluation of individual board members and board chair. And again, there will be different practical things, like from questionnaires to conversations and small committee interviewing the board chair, etc. There is this e-learning course on this topic of evaluation. So we can give the details how to enroll, how to take this course. But very important aspect, and maybe one final thing, General Secretary, probably every year, this is a good written for board as such, probably every other year. So every year it will be too frequent because, as I said, this heartbeat of the board is too slow. I mean, 3-4 meetings a year, so you need a little bit longer time frame for a proper, good, fruitful evaluation.
Thank you, Mirek.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else to add?
Yes, just to one thing I wanted to add to what Mirek has said is, in addition to that, we need to make sure that the evaluations are linked to a kind of a development activity. For example, if we have done an evaluation of the board and we find that maybe the board is very operational and not strategic, or there are certain skills that are missing in the board, then we need to find resources to develop the board. So board development needs to be linked with evaluation. If it is just evaluation for the purpose of ticking a box, then people get tired of it. So that board development becomes an important part of incentivizing boards to be evaluated. Thanks.
Christy?
Yes, in terms of evaluation, I am a general secretary at the moment, and I think it would be helpful for me to be evaluated and to see where areas that I would need to improve, or areas that I might be good. So yeah, besides the board evaluation, which Mirek and Nelson also already said, for the general secretary is actually helpful.
So one is about
Thank you.
deciding to make it part of our culture, and then to also link this evaluation to development, and how much it helps a general secretary as well to be evaluated, to grow and to know, be self-aware. So thank you. The questions are coming in and I'm going to jump. I may not follow the order, but one question here that is right in front of me is, board members provide a face for the movement to the general public. And this is useful for like raising support and other things. But we often select board members on this basis, but these are the very people who are very busy and occupied. So, you know, they hold very high positions and they don't have the time. So they can't do what a board is supposed to do. So what is your take on it? You know, we need them because they are high profile, they help us in the public image, but they're also too busy.
Who should start?
Okay, I can start, Mirek.
The
Very
busiest,
very interesting.
busiest
Yeah,
Doctor,
okay.
Dr. Nelson.
A very interesting observation, by the way, and is a dilemma that many people face. But just to say that availability is really the first qualification. And this is from experience. You can have people that are very qualified in terms of papers, training, their networks, their connections. But if they are not available, they will not be effective. So when we are looking or scouting for board members, we look at all those things that the person asking has said, but then we also ask the availability question. And if the availability question is not adequately answered, we would rather get somebody with lower qualifications or networks, but who will be available. So that's very important. And some of these things you can codify in your governance and manuals. And then in addition to that, we always insist that as part of, and this question is related to the previous one, by the way, is that one of the evaluation about board members is availability. And actually in, let me give an example of Focus Kenya. We have said we have 3 to 4 meetings in a year. You cannot miss more than 2. Okay. So, and every meeting you sign in and that you are available and you participated. But if you cannot attend at least 2 or 3 meetings in a year, then the governance manual says the board can respectively request you to step down, and the board has the power to appoint somebody to act in your place, and in the next AGM this is reviewed. So that's how serious it is. So really availability is so important for board members. Thanks.
If I can add just a few words here, I totally agree with Nelson. What can help in the process of selecting the people who would be willing, yes, to commit, to give the time and energy to the board is a proper, I wouldn't call it like a job description, but position description. So if things are listed there, they should be aware what is expected, like the number of meetings and what this role holds in it. Yes, and if they are serious about their commitment when they sign the paper, yes, I agree. I accept the invitation to join in. Yes, it should go like a whole package, but this element of availability is so important. If maybe a practical suggestion here, if we really want to have this person like an ambassador of the ministry, maybe not invite him or her on the executive board, but advisory board, which maybe I mean, the expectations are not that high in terms of time commitment. Yes, I mean, because of course this is a very important role, also absolutely crucial, important. But there will be some other ways of having this person as a face of the ministry of the movement, an ambassador of the movement, not. Expecting that he or she would be at every single movement. If he or she doesn't join the meetings, it's very destructive for the board culture. So I would rather forget this person and regretfully maybe, but I would rather work on the board culture, which. Yes, helps the board to be effective and serving well the ministry.
So I think the bottom line that you are
Okay,
okay.
Thank you, Mirek and Nelson. I think
Christy.
Yeah, sorry, the internet keeps going on and off. Yeah, being the face of the organization or the ministry is one. I think it's only one of the roles of being a board. But I think the meat or the heart of being a board is really seen on the board table, where everyone is there and discusses issues. And so I think that boards need to have a balanced look at the issue and from different perspectives. That is why we need the different skill sets of boards. So to have a board who are all coming from the ministry side will it's kind of unbalanced. So we need to try to like put different skill sets in the board table so that the discussions are also balanced. So not just being a face, and for example, what was mentioned there for fundraising, but also to really be there, discuss and give your thoughts to the issues that are being presented on the board table.
Thank you. So we need a board that has different skill sets who can make rich decisions, and the bottom line is availability. So thank you for that contribution from each of you. Our next question is that to have a strong and mature board, we need to have a training like this so that, you know, all newly elected boards are ready to take their role. Who is responsible for this onboarding? Do we have a standard process in IFES that we can follow?
Okay.
Go Mirek.
Yes. Okay. What we have on the screen? Okay. Yes, I'm happy to begin. I don't think that there is a standard procedure in IFES as such, but in our governance trainings, we try to educate people that this is very important, the orientation and training for new board members. So we actually offer, we help with this.
Tengok mata. Kenapa? Sedih sangat.
Okay.
It's okay, Mirek. You can continue.
Lepas tangan tu.
Okay.
Saya,
Yes, so we try to give different hints how to run a proper orientation. So there should be proper welcome, there should be orientation session, there should be board documents available to a new board member, there should be a follow-up. You cannot repeat the first impression, so the better you prepare the welcome, the incoming of the new board member, the better effects of his or her new involvement will be in the future. There is a whole list in the manual, in the trainings we provide. There is a whole list of documents which should be, or issues or ideas or topics which should be remembered when orientating a new board member. So you start with the vision. I mean, the person needs to be aware what's the vision of the organization, charter or constitution, corporate bylaws or history of organization, a strategy overview, financial statements or organizational policies. So all these things should be presented, or the new person should be taken through all these documents, or should have access to them to orientate him or herself well. And this is unfortunately often neglected, but very, very, very important aspect of
Saya cuti ini, mari tengok.
effective board.
Thanks, Mirek. Just to add that board orientation, or what is called onboarding, is very, very critical to enable especially new board members to shorten their learning curve, but also to remind existing board members what is it they signed up for. And I think, like Mirek has said, it's important for new board members to understand the vision and the mission of the organization, what you're trying to achieve. And back again to the previous point about commitment, is what does it take to be an effective national movement board members? That need to be handled. And one very important part of board orientation I've found to be critical is helping new board members to distinguish between management and governance. I find that is very important. For some of them come with a lot of passion and energy and excitement, and they think they are coming to manage the movement. So it's to help them to understand they are coming in to provide governance and leadership in that direction. Yeah, so board orientation is very important, and you need to allocate adequate time for it. And I think IFES, like I saw Christy waving a manual, has some good examples. And also national movements do have, even in Focus, we have templates we use that were developed by Dr. Joshua Wadhanga, those of you who remember him, and they are available if you want to borrow and look at that. Thanks.
Christy, could you hold up the manual again, once again, please? Yeah, so that is the IFES governance manual. And if you would like to have the resources, they are also online, and there's an e-learning course as well. So please take a look at that if you don't already have one. I'd like to move on to the next question, as we have time for just these last two questions. One was a question that was asked much earlier on when we were talking about, the tension between the board and the management or the staff, where they responded, they didn't agree on the solution. Like, in the reducing the 20% or whatever it is. So the question was asked by actually the board chair of the Singapore movement. So I'm not it's a long question. It's posted in the, I think it's posted in the message in the chat. To follow up on Daniel's question, it seems like there are two aspects to it. First, it is the diagnosis of the issue, where there appears to be disagreement between the board and the staff. Second is the solution to the issue, where there also appears to be a disagreement. So the two questions are, Am I correct to understand that the injunction not to overstep boundaries comes in the second issue where the solution is concerned? You know, so he's asking, where is it that the board does not overstep their boundary? Is it in the diagnosis or is it in the solution? And then the follow-up question is, for the diagnosis issue, is there any tips how the board can have useful and accurate diagnosis? Because the board are not full-time staff. Thank you for that question, Hani.
Okay, anyone would like to start answering? Nelson,
Okay,
Christy?
yeah, let me pick this because we gave our views. I think a very interesting view. Generally, because of the distinction between management and governance, you will find that on the diagnosis side, the national director is likely to have more information than board members. And this is where I talked about relationship of trust. And also the board should have confidence in the national director they appointed. This reminds me of, apologies for giving this example of marriage counseling, where you don't wait for a problem to begin discovering that you have not been communicating and you don't trust each other, but the problem just comes to expose that. Anyway, so the national director really and his team have very first-hand information because they are on the ground, they are working with students and graduates, but that is not to say that the board has no say, because in the diagnosis process, board members also understand the bigger strategic issues. We understand sometimes, like Mirek shared in his presentation, general secretaries sometimes are overwhelmed by operational issues that they are concerned about. How do we cut this tree in the most effective way? But sometimes they may forget to ask the question, are we in the right forest? So the board, while the general secretary will be very good in having very good ideas of how we need to cut this tree, the board has a broader strategic view that says, are we first of all in the right forest? Are we asking the right questions? Is this even the right question to ask? So it's a cooperation between the national director and the board in diagnosis, but in terms of data and information, the national director has the data and the information. When we begin to interpret the information and make meaning out of it and analyze, I think the whole board really becomes very critical, because they are able now to work out what are the possible options and scenario. I think if there is a question of overstepping, and again, I want to say there shouldn't be an us versus them between the national director and the chair and the rest, because they are all one board, and the national director is a part of the board. But in case we are in that kind of situation, that where there's a national director and his management on one corner and the rest of the board in another corner, really when it comes to diagnosis, when it comes to prescription and deciding, so which option do we take, the board has the final say, not management. And I think, but like I'm saying again, we need to work on an inclusive and consultative process so that the solution is a consensus and not the board using its position to push through what management doesn't think is a very good idea. So I think, yes, if there is already that distinction, board has an important role in making the final decision after receiving all the information. But again, board need to recognize that the information is coming from management, and it's important to listen. That's why I talked about listening and a learning board. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, is it okay to add something more to it? I fully agree again with Nelson. I will add one more thing here, and maybe a question. How do we understand a board and management? Management covers General Secretary, National Director, General Secretary, and the staff team. My opinion here would be that the board should be dealing with General Secretary, just with him, unless she asks the board to help with the staff team level. If we go as a board straight to the staff level to deal with issues down there, this is a very counterproductive. I mean, we question the authority, we question of the national director, we question his or her gifts or leadership role in the movement. So we should never go we should never bypass General Secretary unless we are asked. That's why I will be happy for the clarification what we mean by management. For me, board deals with General Secretary. General Secretary deals with everything what is below him or her, and then all these things would apply, like what Dr. Nelson has been sharing. So we said it a few times. Of course, there. This is not always exactly like this, but the best practice, not only good, but the best practice is that the board has just one employee, General Secretary, and the board deals with this person, and the rest is in his or her hands. So a small clarification would be also needed here, so that we do not create more trouble and confusion than yes, bringing good yes, solutions. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for that answer and clarification. Now we come to the last question, and you need to know that in our region we have two extremes. You know, we have some of our movements who are very good and quiet, but there are a lot of us who are very involved in politics, and we take stands, we go out and demonstrate and all those things. So the question here is, how do you see the role of board when staff have different and strong opinions on political issues, which create tensions and divisions within the movement or within the team?
Wow. So who is the most courageous here? Well, I think that, okay, if I can start, I think that this is the beauty of it, that we have different opinions, but of course, as a movement ministry, we should speak with one voice. I mean, the message should be one. Personally, I think that there is space for different opinions and even like a church background. Yes, I mean, we come from some from conservative to charismatic, and so the same would be with political views and other ideas like this. But if this is the message which should be received as from the ministry, the whole.
しかし、じゃあこうそれがその団体としてミニストリーとしての声としていて。
Speak with one voice. I think this will be my opinion. Also, this is a very sensitive, hot topic, because in my country right now, thousands of people are in the streets. In spite of COVID, I mean, this is madness. But thousands of people are in the streets still, today, against the government, and I think I should be with them, because I. but yes. So personally, individually, I think there will be space for it. As long as we don't start to fight with each other, yes. But that we are mature enough to respect different opinions and preferences of other people concerning politics or church background, etc. But yes, as organization, as movement, there should be one message, and yes, we should be able to ready to submit it, to support it.
Thanks, Mirek. A very interesting question, and I just want to, I'm not a prophet, but to prophesy that we are going to face more of this. I maybe the world is becoming more and more fractious. Even countries that generally used to have very quiet political contests are getting very heated and passionate. You can look at what's happening in the US. Locally here, the Tanzanian election has just ended. A lot of acrimony. We ourselves here in Kenya, we start ours 2 years in advance. We have already started, and there are rallies all over. Yeah, so those are issues we are going to face, and they are going to get a little harder to deal with as we go ahead. So big headache for boards. But just to say from Kenyan experience, because we've had very heated political contests that some of them have ended up in violence, Focus has had to develop systems of managing this kind of political diversity. And I think the first thing is we need to have a system of distinguishing individual political positions vis-a-vis the official position of the organization. Very, very important. I mean, we have seen situations where the chair of the board or the general secretary stands up and issues a statement to the press or to other people purporting to be speaking on behalf of the movement. Now, so what we do is that we have very clear policies on who, how, and when the general secretary or the chair of the board can speak on behalf of the movement. And we have identified clearly who is the official spokesperson of the ministry, so that even if a board member tomorrow went there and called a press conference or talked to somebody about something, we will openly say that's a personal opinion, we respect it, but that is not the position of the movement. So you need to have very clear rules and policies on who speaks for the movement, how, when. And then secondly is to recognize that individuals have their own personal political beliefs and civil responsibilities, and they can participate in political activity as individuals. That is fine, but it needs to be clear that they are doing it in their individual capacity. However, coming back to the board, I always say, and I served in the Focus board for almost maybe 10 years or more, during time when we had a lot of those political things, is that board members in their official capacity need to think themselves like judges. You know, the limitations that apply to judges. For example, judges may have certain views, but they are limited in how they can speak about it and show it in public. So I think board members should accept responsibility that when you are a board member of an politically neutral organization like a student movement or a church, when you are a board member of an organization that when things go bad, people will come to you for solutions, you have to be very careful about how you express your political views. Otherwise, you lose the moral authority to arbitrate or solve any problem. So this is very serious for the national director. The general secretary is also very serious, like for the board chair and other positions that tend to have public face of the movement. So a lot of wisdom and maturity required. And there are many times I withheld as a board chair. I completely refused to officially or publicly state my personal position on any political issues, and especially on social media, which does not forget. I will tell people it does not forget. You write a comment, which 5 years down the line will come back to bite you very hard when now you have been called upon to try and solve a problem. So that kind of wisdom is required. Thanks.
If I can, yes, thank you. I mean, I enjoyed also like listening to you, Nelson. If I could add one more thing to it, as always, it can be trouble or a fantastic opportunity for a strong testimony. Individually, we can differ. We can have totally different, opposite opinions on politics, on issues, yes? But when we get together as Christian student group, as the Christian student movement, we are one. And this is a very strong voice, like a very strong testimony to the unity in Christ, in spite of personal individual preferences. The Polish movement, just one example, we hosted a European conference on evangelism in the early 90s. And this was the time when the Yugoslavia war broke out. So the country of Yugoslavia split into all these other countries like Serbia and Croatia today. We had delegations of students coming from all these countries. There was still war going on. But at the conference, everyone who was there remembered till today. Students from Croatia and students from Serbia, worshiping together, praying together every night. And the countries were at war, I mean, killing each other. But Christian students were together, praying together and worshiping together. It was such a powerful testimony. So I think that in our countries, this is what we also experience and what we can encourage for, just to be one in the name of Christ, in spite of our personal preferences or opinions, etc. Yes,
thank you, Mirek. Christy, you want to say anything?
Yeah. Yes. I think this is also a question for the General Secretary, not just for the board, especially because if the staff have differing and strong opinions on political issues, supposedly the General Secretary is the one holding them together, but oftentimes it is very difficult. It has been the experience, our experience here in IVCF Philippines, and our staff had very strong opinions and they're in social media. So yeah, and it has created tensions and divisions. So previously, IVCF Philippines would make a statement and bring that statement to everyone, but now there is no way we can do a statement because we are not united in our political opinions. So as national director and as board, I think of course staff have freedom to express their political opinions, but they have to say that it is not the opinion of the movement, but their own. And in terms of this, I think because it has created a lot of even relationship tensions and divisions. Actually, what we did was to listen to everyone, and we have asked Annette in one of our staff conferences actually to be an arbiter of the staff, as everyone expressed their opinions. And after that, I think everyone was able to listen to one another, and that kind of dissipated the tensions. And so in terms of the role of the board, I think the board needs to help the staff muddle through all these opinions and tensions as well as divisions. Be a pastoral. I think that the role of the board would be pastoral in that sense, to listen to the staff, because no one can do a statement for the movement, especially during the time of divisions and tensions.
Thank you. So in this very divisive issue, we are reminded that who is responsible to make that call or the official statement for the movement. And we don't, if one person speaks, it is not the voice of the movement, and we need to speak and be clear it's individual. I like the reminder that social media does not forget. So we need to be careful. And as board, we are like judges, and we need to be in a way neutral, but also pastoral in listening to the real tensions. And lastly, what Mirek held up for us, that we are on all sides, but how do we model that we are one in Christ? Thank you very much for this whole webinar. I cannot thank the team enough for Mirek and for putting together this team of Dr. Nelson, Christy, Jen, and Tim Adams, who came and shared their time with us. And most of all, I cannot thank all of you board and general secretaries who made this possible as well. So thank you.